The fire beneath Burkinasu. Beneath the rust-red skies of Burkinasu, a landlocked nation forgotten by maps but burned into the memories of men who remembered what justice once tasted like. The wind told stories. And it told them to those who would listen. Ibrahim Traore always listened. He stood barefoot in the ochre dust of his boyhood village. The sleeves of his military green tunic rolled to his elbows, his face to the horizon. The village elders had gathered under the great baobab tree, their silence heavy. There was news, not the kind that traveled through radios, but the kind that pulsed beneath the land, a rhythm that said something was moving, fast and heavy. That rhythm was trucks, 47 of them, loaded with steel and treachery. "They think we won't see it coming," whispered Ayuba, his oldest advisor, who'd once taught political theory with a Kalashnikov slung across his back. "But the land sees, and she speaks." Ibrahim didn't respond. He was already calculating, not numbers, but intent. Smugglers had long used the desert borders to slip past checkposts. But this was no ordinary operation. This was orchestrated, funded, armed. This was a prelude. The capital, Ouagala, was restless. Murals of Traore, in bold strokes of red and gold, towered over concrete blocks where people queued for bread but sang revolution songs while they waited. The revolution wasn't over. That was the message. It was permanent. It had to be. Burkinasu was the only nation in the region to reject foreign aid with conditions, to expel military advisors dressed as development consultants, and to nationalize every inch of lithium beneath its cracked soil. That made it dangerous, not to its people, but to those who wore suits stitched with imperial threads. And somewhere in Brussels, and in Arlington, and in Riyadh, someone had decided the experiment had lasted long enough. Ayuba laid out the intel on a grainy table in the war room, a repurposed community center painted with scenes of Pan-African unity. 7 routes, 1 destination, weaponry enough for a division, but not registered to any state. Black market, high-end, new, clean, and the men moving it, some locals, but mostly mercs. South African, Ukrainian, 1, maybe 2 French. Traore's fist tightened. "It's not a smuggling ring. It's an invasion in slow motion." Ayuba nodded. Sponsored chaos. They'd seen it before. In Mali, in Libya, even in Congo. Always the same story. Destabilize, insert peacekeepers, extract resources while the fire burns. Only this time, it was Burkinasu, and Ibrahim Traore had spent his life ensuring that wouldn't happen here. "Operation Pine Noir," Ayuba whispered. The Black Thorn. The name had been intercepted on a satellite relay. It wasn't just a code name. It was a threat. Traore walked alone that night. Past murals. Past the bakery where children still laughed. Past the university steps where he once shouted poetry into tear gas. He remembered the old days, the day they overthrew the puppet regime. When students and farmers and poets took the palace not with bullets, but with conviction. They had no tanks, just belief. And now, someone wanted to unwrite that belief to make Burkinasu just another headline in someone else's newspaper. Not on his watch. Not ever. Back in the war room, he called a midnight council. "No speeches tonight," he began. "Only questions. Who is moving the trucks? Who is funding them? Who has infiltrated our South?" His ministers were tired, some scared. But Traore, he was volcanic. He turned to General Kamadi, the head of Border Command. "Prepare the sand circle. I want every goat path sealed, every checkpoint reinforced, and broadcast to the nation tomorrow. Tell the people what we've found." "But won't that cause panic?" "No," Traore said, eyes fierce. "It will cause vigilance." The next morning, at dawn, the national radio station La Voix de Burkinasu crackled to life. A calm but defiant voice spoke. "To the people of Burkinasu, 47 trucks of foreign weapons are headed toward our soil. They are not here to help. They are not here to trade. They are here to colonize us again. Not with flags, but with fire. We say, number. We say, never again. The revolution is not over. It begins again with you." Across the country, something ancient stirred. Men paused in the fields. Women clenched machetes used for harvest. Students closed their textbooks, and open their eyes. The land was whispering again, and this time, everyone was listening. 3 nights later, under a moon like a cracked silver coin, the first truck crossed into Burkinasu. It was silent, its lights painted red to hide in the desert darkness. Inside were crates labeled agricultural equipment, but packed tight with weapons slick with oil and freshly unboxed. NATO, standard rifles, anti-aircraft drones, even communication jammers pre-programmed in French. The driver didn't speak. He just followed coordinates. GPS had replaced conviction a long time ago. 2 kilometers away, in the low hills of Sangali province, Commander Jibo and his Sand Circle unit lay flat against the dune. Trained by guerrilla fighters in the mountains of Ethiopia and disciplined by war, these weren't soldiers. They were ghosts in the dust. "They've breached Zone 4, Jibo whispered into the radio. A burst of static. Then Trower's voice came through. "Shadow Protocol. Intercept. Do not kill. We need answers." Jibo smiled faintly. "Understood." At 3:12 local time, the Sand Circle struck. It was surgical. Tires shredded with spike cords. Driver detained in under 40 seconds. Cargo seized. But the shock wasn't in what they found. It was what they didn't. No serials, no manufacturer marks. "Everything wiped clean," Jibo reported. "Even the comms gear. It's all sanitized." Ayuba stared at the photos. "This isn't Merc work. This is state level." Trower leaned back, arms crossed. "Or worse, it's the new empire. The one with no flag, just investors." In the capital, the revelation hit like a thunderclap. Thousands gathered outside the Parliament circle. Not to riot, but to protect, to stand guard. They wore red scarves, the color of the revolution, and formed human walls around key institutions. Farmers marched from the plains with tools raised. University students handed out water and resistance manuals printed on recycled paper. The message was clear: you will not rewrite our story. But in the south, things were unraveling. 3 border posts had gone dark. Satellite feeds showed fires in nearby villages. Drone footage revealed masked soldiers speaking English and Russian, moving with tactical precision. It was more than infiltration. It was a test, and Burkinasu had to pass. Trower summoned his war cabinet. "We need to unmask the operation," he said. "We need to follow the money." Ayuba had been ready. "There's a shell company in Cyprus," he began. "Black Vein Holdings, registered to a lawyer who doesn't exist. But its bank trail connects to 2 entities, one in the Emirates and the other." He paused, "a subsidiary of Envronix." That name made the room fall silent. Envronix is a global mining conglomerate. The same one Trower had kicked out 3 years ago after they tried to bribe him with a private island and a cabinet seat. The same one that called him a rogue actor at the UN. The same one that needed lithium. And Burkinasu had more of it than anywhere else on Earth. "If we hit them publicly, they'll deny and spin it," said Minister Mbeki. "Call it a conspiracy. We'll be the ones under sanctions." "I don't want spin," Trower said. "I want smoke." He outlined the plan. "We leak one name, one document. Let the networks tear it apart. Then we strike their field agents while they're busy explaining. A media smokescreen? A trap." Ayuba nodded slowly. "Old tricks, new targets." While the story broke across global news, African president accuses mining giant of covert war. Trower's special unit, the Desert Thorns, mobilized. They weren't big, just 34 fighters, but they were faster than sound and twice as quiet. Their objective: a forward base on the fringe of the Haraga drylands, where intercepted comms suggested foreign advisors were operating. They arrived under cloud cover. At 2:47, they breached the perimeter. By 2:53, they had the proof: hard drives, maps, supply routes, even a drone footage compilation marked Phase 2, transition governance. They weren't just planning a takeover. They were planning a new regime, one with a puppet council and a Western-friendly technocrat leader. His name was already on a drafted constitution. The next morning, Trower held a live press conference. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just laid out the facts. Names, dates, maps, and this: "To those who think Africa is a chessboard, we are not your pawns. We are not your next Afghanistan, nor your next Libya. Burkinasu is not for sale, and those who try to buy us with bullets will drown in their own greed." The people roared, but in the embassies of certain friendly nations, phones began to ring, and in the glass towers of Inverness, lawyers began shredding documents. But the danger wasn't gone. That night, a drone strike hit a convoy carrying medical supplies to the sand circle. 7 dead, 4 injured. One girl, 12 years old, lost her leg. The next morning, someone left a message in a plastic case at the Parliament's gate. Inside, a photo of the girl, written in red ink, "Stand down, or she is only the first." Trower stood still as stone, holding the image in his hand. "We're past negotiations now," he said quietly. Ayuba stepped forward. "What do we do next?" Trower looked out the window, and then, with the weight of centuries in his voice, said, "We make them bleed." There were no satellites that could track what Trower did next. No press briefings, no memos, no leaks, just a whisper moving through the country like wind over tall grass. A word, Nyoka. The snake. Nyoka wasn't a person. Nyoka was a protocol, activated only once before, when Trower had ousted the French-backed general 10 years ago, using nothing but an outdated radio and the loyalty of a village militia. Now, it was time again. In a small metal shack outside Koroba, Ayuba met with one of the key architects of Nyoka, an old woman with a silver tooth and no official title. Her name was Mama Dara. In another life, she had led revolts against colonial forces in the deep forests of Ikenya. Now, she ran a hidden network of information brokers, ex-soldiers, rogue techies, and former diplomats. "We need to go under their skin," Ayuba told her. "Deep, silent, surgical." Dara lit a clay pipe. "You want me to open the old paths?" Ayuba nodded. "Every last one," she grinned. "Then may the snake coil." While the world debated Trower's accusations on primetime panels, while Inverness claimed total innocence and deep concern, while Western embassies issued vague travel advisories, Mama Dara's people were already in motion. In Lagos, a banker disappeared after breakfast. In Nairobi, a drone pilot defected to the Burkinasu embassy. In Dubai, a flash drive appeared on a minister's desk containing uncut audio of a conversation. "Push the coup. The mineral rights are already secured. We'll paint him as a despot once it starts." Voice identified. Invronix board member. Back in Burkinasu, Trower was preparing something else. Not just resistance, but permanence. He had summoned a gathering of the Old Flame Council, an underground council of revolutionaries, policy theorists, and exiled leaders from other African nations. It was time to rewrite the doctrine of survival. "We can't just defend Burkinasu," he told them. "We must outlive this moment, outlast this phase. Show every small nation what it means to resist and stay standing." They began drafting the Declaration of Post-Imperial Sovereignty, not a manifesto, a blueprint. Public banking, militia-integrated security, decentralized communications, resource trusts owned by workers, mandatory political education at age 16. It wasn't theory. It was war design for peace. Meanwhile, the counteroffensive had begun in silence. 3 Nyoka cells were active. Nyoka Red, cyber, infiltration. Nyoka Black, undercover exfiltration of corrupted officials. Nyoka Gold, media warfare. Red Cell cracked open a server in Malta. Gold Cell spread the leaks through sympathetic journalists in Brazil and Malaysia. Black Cell captured 2 foreign operatives disguised as NGO workers, both carrying encrypted satellite beacons. Under interrogation, one broke. "They're accelerating the timeline," he said. "They've greenlit Phase 3. It's happening in 5 days. 5 days. That's all they had." And that's when the rains began heavy, endless. Roads turned to rivers. Communications faltered. The countryside grew impossible to patrol, perfect cover for a final assault. Trower called a midnight meeting. "Let them come," he said. "But we can't stop them all," Jibo warned. "There are too many entry points." Trower looked at the map. "Then we don't stop them. We expose them." He turned to Ayuba. "Leak the war plan. Every truck. Every false flag. every fake Burkinasu uniform they planned to wear. Ayuba hesitated. To who? To the world, Trower said. Let them see who the real invaders are. It worked like a wildfire on dry savanna. Within hours, the global narrative began to crack. Videos of masked soldiers with American accents surfaced on East African social media. French journalists released footage of drones marked with mining company barcodes. Whistleblowers from former contractor firms began speaking anonymously. Envronic stock dropped 27% in 2 days. And on the ground in Burkinasu, something extraordinary happened. When the 47 trucks of foreign mercenaries finally rolled in, expecting to be greeted by chaos and confusion, they found roadblocks made of tractors, school buses, and grandmothers holding machetes. In Sangali province, the first major confrontation occurred. The foreign-backed forces, dressed in counterfeit Burkinasu military gear, attempted to seize the radio tower. They were met by 3,000 farmers, armed with hunting rifles and a single old tank painted with the words, "For the Mothers." They didn't retreat. They surrendered. Across the country, the same scene repeated. The empire had no face, but Burkinasu had a soul, and that soul had risen. Trower addressed the nation at dawn, not in uniform, not behind glass, but standing in the pouring rain in front of the parliament among the people. They thought we would fall quietly. They thought silence would be our surrender. They were wrong. The era of puppet states is over. The new Africa speaks with its own voice, and this voice will never beg again. As the people roared, Mamadara looked up at the clouds and whispered, "Let them write this day in ink that never fades." And from behind the smoke screens of finance, oil, and strategy, the empires, for the first time in decades, paused, because something had awakened, not just resistance, revolution. The coup was dead. But the empire wasn't. Its agents didn't wear uniforms. They wore suits. Its generals weren't soldiers. They were lobbyists. Its bombs weren't dropped from planes. They were signed into contracts. Burkinasu had survived the attack, but survival was not enough. Now it had to outlive the war. Trower's speech had traveled further than any army. From crowded cafes in Bamako, to university halls in Kingston, to the newsrooms in Johannesburg and the corners of Harlem, people had seen it, shared it, studied it. A phrase had caught fire. This voice will never beg again. Burkina's had become a symbol. But symbols, Trower knew, don't survive by inspiration alone. They need infrastructure not just to rebuild what was destroyed, but to defend what was born. He called for a permanent revolution. In the days that followed, the new Burkinasu took shape. 1. The Council of Continuity was formed, a transitional Pan-Africanist governing body made up of civilians, ex-rebels, engineers, economists, poets, and even 3 former enemies who had defected during the coup. 2. The National Defense Commune replaced the traditional army. No more generals. Every citizen was trained in defense, and elected battalions rotated quarterly. A militia of minds and bodies, loyal not to a man, but to the people. 3. The people's treasury seized back control of all natural resources. Every ounce of lithium, gold, and cobalt would now be mined, refined, and sold under public ownership, with profits redistributed through neighborhood councils and universal service programs. 4. The Global Tribunal of Extraction Crimes was announced, a digital platform where nations could submit evidence of corporate neo-colonialism, enforced debt, and resource theft to be archived, investigated, and judged by a coalition of Global South scholars and legal minds. The outside world was stunned. Some laughed, some panicked. The IMF froze discussions. Envronics tried to quietly sell off assets in Africa. A few African leaders issued generic statements of concern, but others, especially the youth, were listening. And something cracked open. In Uganda, students began a sit-in against a foreign pipeline project. In Honduras, protesters carried signs saying, "We are all Burkinas." In Haiti, a rogue general refused new American aid. "I want a Trower, not a paycheck," he said. The pressure grew. Satellite channels spun disinformation campaigns, accusing Trower of genocide, secret prisons, even cannibalism. One outlet aired a leaked audio of him ordering executions. It was quickly debunked. The voice didn't match, and the words were AI-generated. In response, Trower didn't speak. He sent Ayuba. The world knew Ayuba now. The soft-voiced minister who had dismantled the coup from within. She appeared on an international live stream. They come for our voice because they know we've found it. They poison our name because they cannot kill our ideas. They fear us not because we are violent, but because we are free. She smiled, quiet and calm. And freedom is a virus that spreads faster than fear. Burkinasu was now a mirror, and many didn't like what they saw in it. In a conference room in Washington, a defense analyst muttered, "We created the antibodies. Now we're infected." In London, a retired MP whispered to a journalist, "It's like Sankara came back, but with broadband." In Lagos, in Dakar, in Windhoek, people gathered in circles after work, dreaming aloud. What if we tried what they tried? What if we said no? What if we stopped asking permission to be whole? But empires don't vanish. They mutate. One morning, Mamadara walked into Trower's office. Satellite caught movement along the Benga border. Foreign equipment. U.S. Markings scratched off. Trower didn't flinch. "We knew they'd try again. They're not sending trucks this time," she said. "What then?" She slid over a folder. Inside, a memo detailing a cyber disruption plan, set to collapse Burkinasu's entire power grid using firmware backdoors. Trower looked at her. "When?" Dara exhaled. "Tonight." There was no panic. Trower gathered his closest advisors. "We don't fight this with fists," he said. "We fight it with foresight." Burkinasu's digital infrastructure had already begun migrating to an indigenous OS, one built by local engineers, run on mesh networks powered by solar hubs, unreachable by outside satellites. But it wasn't complete. So Trower made a call, not to a military base, but to a community of teenage coders who had fled the city during the coup attempt. He asked them one thing: finish the firewall for everyone. They did it in 17 hours. That night, as the global system surged against Burkinasu's grid, something incredible happened. Nothing. The attack failed. The lights stayed on. The hospitals kept running. The revolution broadcasted through local networks, unbroken. In a village near Timbalo, an old man looked up at a glowing street lamp and wept. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said. And so the final convulsion passed. Not with fire, not with blood, but with endurance. The empire had thrown its last tantrum. Burkinasu had held. Epilogue. Weeks later, at a global summit of formerly colonized nations, Trower was asked what Burkinasu would do next. He smiled. "We will teach. We will share code. We will offer medicine. And when the next small country is threatened, we will stand beside them, not as saviors, but as brothers. Let this century belong not to kings or banks or flags, but to the people who never stopped believing in their right to live with dignity." 3 nights later, under a moon like a cracked silver coin, the earth itself seemed to inhale, as though holding its breath, waiting. The first truck crossed into Burkinasu at 3:12 local time, hidden in the silvery dark. Its headlights painted the dusty road in a muted red glow, subtle, almost frightened of being noticed. Inside, crates stamped with the official label agricultural equipment were loaded with deadly secrets. NATO, standard rifles sleek with fresh oil, anti-aircraft drones with thrumming propellers, and comms jammer units pre-programmed in French. The driver, gaunt behind the wheel, didn't speak. He didn't need to. GPS coordinates were his compass. Conviction was irrelevant. 2 kilometers northeast, in the low hills of Sangali province, Commander Jibo watched from behind sand dunes. A hush lay upon his sand circle unit. No chatter, no breath, only the soft click of weapons being leveled. "They've breached Zone 4, Jibo whispered into his radio. A static hiss. Then Ibrahim Trower's voice cut through. "Shadow protocol. Intercept. Do not kill. Bring me answers." Jibo allowed himself a half smile. Understood. Surgical silence. At exactly 3:18, the sand circle moved. In a surgically precise sweep, they shredded the truck's rear tires with hidden spike cords, seized control of the driver in less than 40 seconds, and secured the crates in protective coverings. Dust billowed, mingling with the adrenaline-charged hush of the mission's aftermath. But the real shock emerged when Jibo sent back images to the war room. He transmitted photos of the weapons spotless, unmarred by stencils, serials, or manufacturer markings. The radios, clean, drones, pristine, everything scrubbed. "It has been sanitized," he reported quietly. Ayuba, Trower's closest advisor, stared at the screen in disbelief. "This isn't mercenary work," he said, unmoving. "This is state level." Trower exchanged a hard glance with him. "Or worse," he replied quietly, "the new empire. One with no flag, just investors." Meanwhile, word of the interception reached Ouaggala. The capital buzzed like a hive disturbed. Muffled alarms echoed through Parliament's corridors. Thousands gathered around the Parliament circle not to riot, but to protest a shadow incursion. With red scarves round their necks, they formed human walls, farmers holding machetes, students distributing water and resistance manifestos, mothers clutching children tight. Standing guard meant shielding not just buildings, but the memory of a revolution. But south of the capital, the war had already begun quietly. 3 border posts had gone dead, no signal, no response. Satellite feeds, grainy but revealing, showed the smoldering ruins of villages. Drone footage captured figures in masks, speaking English and Russian, their tactics precise and purposeful. A blitz of infiltration, not invasion but lethal nonetheless. Inside the war room, Trower tightened his jaw. "They're conducting a test." Unmasking the players minutes later, the war cabinet convened. "We need to unmask this operation," Trower said, pale blue gaze intense. "Follow the money, expose the sponsors." Ayuba barely paused before responding. "There's a shell company in Cyprus, Black Vein Holdings. No real people behind it, but its bank trail links to 2 points, one in the Emirates, the other 5. Trower held his breath. Ayuba completed the thought. "A subsidiary of Envronics." The room fell to stone. Envronics was the multinational mining giant Trower had expelled 3 years earlier, after they courted him with bribes, promises of private estates, and cabinet seats in exchange for lithium rights. At the UN, they'd branded him rogue. And now, the same corporation whose hands he had forced away was quietly invading with sanitized weaponry. Trower looked toward Minister Mbeki. "Public exposure?" "If we go public," she cautioned, "they'll spin it. Say it's conspiracy. We'll be the ones hit with sanctions." Trower shook his head. "No spin. We reveal one name, one document. Let the networks do the rest. Then our Desert Thorns, not large, but lethal move to take down field agents while the empire is buried in excuses." Ayuba nodded slowly. "Old tricks, new targets, media storm and knife's edge." The name exploded across global news within hours. African president accuses mining giant of covert war. In the Haraga drylands, 34 members of the Desert Thorns, lightly armored, fiercer than desert wind, prepared to move at night. Their mission: infiltrate a forward base tipped to be stocked with Envernix-linked hardware. Under cloudy darkness, they arrived. By 2:53, they had seized hard drives filled with drone footage, supply maps, and a draft of the Phase 2 Transition Governance Plan, a future puppet council, Western-aligned technocratic leader already sketched, and a drafted constitution ready to sign. At dawn, Trower faced a live press conference, calm as a mountain stream. He spoke only truth. "To those who treat Africa like a chessboard, we are not your pawns. We are not your next Libya or Afghanistan. Burkinasu is not for sale. Those who try to buy us with bullets will drown in their own greed." Applause thundered. Trower dared not read the clouds gathering above embassies abroad, but he could feel it. In corporate high-rises, alarms shrieked, shredders burned paper. But the war wasn't over. That night, a drone struck a convoy of medical vehicles heading to the sand circle. 7 dead, 4 injured. A 12-year-old girl lost her leg. By morning, someone left a gruesome gift at Parliament's gate. A photo of the girl with the message painted in red. "Stand down. Oregon, she is only the first." In the war room, Trower stood silent as stone. Holding the image, he whispered, "We're past negotiation. Now we make them bleed." Enter Nyoka. From here on, no satellite could follow him. No press release or memo revealed his next move. Only a whisper. Nyoka, the old protocols of sabotage and disruption. Later that night, in a corrugated iron shack outside Koroba, Ayuba crouched across from an old woman with a silver tooth and the eyes of an eagle. Mama Dara, once a forest rebel, now the clandestine heart of Burkinasu's spy network. We need visibility inside their structure, Ayuba told her. Surgical, invisible. Dara drew smoke from her clay pipe. You want the old paths opened. Ayuba nodded. Every path. She smiled, cracked as an old tree trunk in winter. Then, let the snake coil. The cells turn. While global media sputtered over Trower's accusations, Mama Dara's network went to work. In Lagos, a banker vanished after breakfast. In Nairobi, a drone pilot defected to the Burkinasu embassy in tears. In Dubai, an encrypted flash drive landed on a minister's desk inside. Raw audio. Push the coup. Mineral rights are secured. Paint him as a despot once it starts. Envronix board member. Back in Ouagadougou, Trower presided over the Old Flame Council, a founding body of revolutionaries, scholars, and exiled African leaders. It was time to not just resist, but to build. We must outlast this, he said. Show the world what permanence means. They drafted the Declaration of Post-Imperial Sovereignty, a governance blueprint combining public banking, populace-trained defense communes, resource trusts, and civic education from age 16 onward. Not just democratic, it was prefigurative. Meanwhile, 3 Nyoka cells activated. Nyoka Red. Cyber infiltration cracked a server in Malta. Nyoka Black. Exfiltrated corrupted officials covertly. Nyoka Gold. Media leaks dropped classified footage through sympathetic press in Brazil and Malaysia. Nyoka Black captured 2 Envronix contractors posing as NGO workers. Under interrogation, 1 surrendered. Their accelerating phase. 3. 5 days out. 5 days. And then the rains came. Sheets of it. Relentless. Mud swallowed roads. Communications faltered. The whole countryside became a labyrinth, dripped in darkness. Global slapback. At midnight, Trower met with Ayuba and Jibo in candlelit secrecy. Jibo looked at the map. We can't stop them all. Trower closed his eyes, voice low as dry thunder. Then we exposed them. Ayuba blinked. The war room grew still. Leak the field plans, the logistics, the fall, wear uniforms, everything. Let the world see the invaders for who they are. Within hours, the leak was global wildfire. Videos of English-accented mercs, drones carrying mining, cargo signatures, whistleblowers from supplier firms, everything poured out. Envronix stock crashed 27% in 2 days. When the trucks arrived, rain-soaked roads groaned as foreign trucks rumbled into Burkinasu, expecting panic. But they met something else, resistance. In Sangali, 3,000 farmers armed with hunting rifles and led by a broken-down Soviet-era tank painted "For the Mothers" faced them at the radio tower. The invaders froze, then surrendered. Everywhere else, the same. Roadblocks improvised with tractors, buses, and grandmothers holding machetes. The empire had no face, but Burkinasu did. A soul. The dawn address. At dawn, as rain fell like blessings, Trower stood on Parliament steps among the people. No uniform, just soaked clothes and conviction. They thought silence would be our surrender. They were wrong. The era of puppet states is finished. Africa speaks with its own voice, and it will never beg again. Voices rose thunders of reawakening. Mama Dara gazed upward. May they write this day in ink that never fades. Behind the global veils of finance and strategy, empires paused, because something was awake, not just resistance, but revolution. End of Part 2. Shadows on the Border.